What's going on, guys? Dr. Andrew Fix back from Physio Room for another episode of The Code. Sitting here with my buddy, Shaun Cook. Shaun is one of my favorite coaches, and he is the owner of Crucible Strength here in the Denver, Colorado area. So, Shaun, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for having me, man. I'm super excited about this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are sitting here in the gym where you spend most of your time. I spend most of my time. But will you just give the people tuning in to listen to this a little bit of information on your background, how you got into what you're doing, how you wound up here inside of Lion's Den and to Denver?
Yeah, sure. I'll make it fairly brief. I've been a trainer for now almost 20 years. I'm 40 years old, so you can do the math. I got into this, knew what I wanted to do pretty early. It was just a couple of years. Well, I guess, we're going on 2.5 years now, to where I started my business, Crucible Strength. And it started right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Honestly, found myself here, my good buddy, Tristan, who owns the Lion's Den here, has allowed me a home here. I knew I wanted to keep things, pretty low level as far as overhead and everything like that. So this may change in the future, but to be quite honest with you, Andrew, I didn't really want some of the headaches that come along with the other pieces of having the name up in lights, so that's the trade-off I made. So I have a home here. I run Crucible Strength, one day I might put those names up in lights, but quite honestly, my business has thrived and I've done great. Kind of taking the ego out of it and being okay. It bothers me sometimes, we all have that ego, it's nice to have your name up, but honestly, the Lion's Den has been a great home to have, and kind of allowing me to just kind of work my craft without having to worry about a lot of the other BS that comes along with the other stuff,
Sure. Yeah. And so you sort of like launched that basically 2.5 years ago, like you said.
Yeah.
How long have you been here in the Denver, Colorado area?
Since 2011. So my wife and I moved here at the end of 2011. So 2022. Yeah. So I mean, we're at like 11, coming up on 11 years being here in the Denver area. So not a native, originally from. I was born and raised in Kentucky, and then lived in Cincy. So that's where I met my wife. We lived in Cincinnati. And trained there for a long time, and decided to head out west to the mountains. Super glad we did too. I love Colorado.
I'm right there with you. I mean, we've basically been here 2.5 years, and I think it's technically just under 2.5, but we've been pretty stoked to be out here. Had a little mountain trip this weekend, which was pretty fun. And I think so many people that move here, whether it's like us coming from kind of that Midwestern, Ohio.
And where are you originally from? I actually, as much as I work with you, I forget sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
Is it Missouri?
So I lived in Kansas City before moving here, but and James is from the Kansas City area, but I'm from Wisconsin. Originally.
Okay, I knew it was one of.
Speaking of which, go Pack Go! A huge Packers fan,
and I'm a Bengals fan, as you know.
And that's what I want to ask you. So today, as we're recording this, is the start of the NFL 2022 season. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on, are the Bengals going to be able to maintain the level of play that they ended the season with last year and get themselves back into a deep playoff run again?
Yeah, and I think, it's so hard. There's so many factors involved in actually reaching a Super Bowl.
Yep.
They way overachieved, and that's my reasoning that they're going to still be a really good team. Now, you have to have a lot of things go right and AFC is loaded this year too, so that's good. It's going to be a tough go, but I still think the Bengals are going to be a killer hard team to deal with. Joe Burrow's changed that culture, and quite honestly, like, they're ahead of schedule, and that's my reason that there won't be a regression. It's not like people expect them to be good, they reach the Super Bowl, and you have that Super Bowl regression that everyone talks about. Is those guys weren't expected to be anywhere. I think they're only still ascending. So could be wrong, but that's my take on it. I think they're going to still be a really they addressed their offensive line, which was their biggest weakness. I think they're still going to be a problem.
I agree with you. I think, and I think in that division, given all the legal drama, contractual drama, whatnot that has gone on in Cleveland. I think it's the Ravens or the Bengals probably who are going to be duking it out.
I love watching the Browns implode on themselves right now. I think when you take on a contract like that, you get everything that's coming to you.
Yeah. And I feel like this is kind of like typical of Cleveland, similar to in the NFC North. I feel like all of the bad luck stuff or the stuff that doesn't turn out always happens to Detroit.
Yeah.
The Lions wind up, usually scraping the bottom of the barrel because stuff doesn't go how they pictured it might go. And I'm excited for the season to get going. Obviously, we're both big football fans, and hopefully we don't experience, I don't believe they play this year, Cincinnati and Green Bay, but
no, I don't think they do.
I remember watching that game last year where we just missed field goal
they
after
couldn't kick a field goal
back and forth, and I think there was like 5 missed kicks or something between the two teams.
There were between Crosby and Evan McPherson. They couldn't hit anything.
It was just painful to watch that. So I'm looking forward to things getting started. But part of the reason I wanted to have you here on the podcast to talk to everybody was, I have had the opportunity working as a physical therapist, being involved in fitness, to work with a lot of different coaches, both personally and professionally. I've worked in different parts of the country. I lived in different parts of the country. And I would say without a doubt, you are one of, if not the most thoughtful coaches when you're working with clients that I have met. And what I mean by that is every time I talk to you or hear you talk, overhear you talk to a client, there's always a method or a purpose to every single thing that you have them do, which I think is the way that it should be, but I don't think that's the way that it actually is in the real world. I think a lot of times in physical therapy clinics or personal training scenarios, a lot of times people just have their clients do things for the sake of filling time or burning calories or whatever, making them breathe hard without there really being a dialed in reason behind it. And I don't ever see that with you. I always see that there's a reason for every little detail.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That comes with its own headaches too. You're right. I do think about that probably like too much. I have a lot of sleepless nights because even after all these years, I've been in this business a long time too. And to be, maybe you tell, actually, I'd like your opinion on this too, from the physical therapy standpoint, but I'm not going to mention any names, and certainly not here. The den, one of the reasons, back to the previous question, what brought me to the den is, we're all the coaches are different, but you want to surround yourself with kind of like-minded people, and I feel like that we've done that here. And we obviously may have we're not going to agree on 100% everything. We have a lot of different methodologies and stuff like that in our own styles, whatever. Right. But I think overall, there's nothing with most of us, would you say that's like, man, those are deal breakers, you know what I mean? But I've been at places before where I've watched, and good friends of mine too, but training, they would never admit this to you, but and I don't mind putting a 90% on it. I'd say 90% of the trainers I've worked with in my life do shoot from the hip every single day of their training life. Which is weird because like in no other field would some of these people pay that much money. Like say if you're building a house, in almost no other field would you allow the professional that you're paying to like shoot from the hip that much. And what I mean by shoot from the hip is obviously like you're just kind of making up shit as you go along. And look at like a nice little change of pace is good every once in a while from a randomness standpoint. I think there's a behavioral psychology to exercise too. Like you have to sometimes get away from, I don't know if you feel this, but sometimes you need to get away from structure sometimes just for small brief periods because just kind of it's fun, but more often than not it was quite the opposite, and not in the way that like say, and not even in the way that they say like CrossFit embraces randomness for the sake of like, I'm not even talking about that because that's with CrossFit that mentality is being able to adapt to a lot of different situations. So in and of itself, there's a overarching kind of methodology to that. I'm talking about trainers for a large part of most trainers are they're just flippantly going through the motions and making stuff up without a reason.
And I see a lot of times
What do you think about your field? I mean, your field, I don't know
Oh,
if like is the same way.
yeah. I mean, I would say, I would say in a lot of physical therapy clinics, it is absolutely the same way. And without going down a huge rabbit hole about the healthcare system and how insurance and whatnot plays into this, I think a big part of the reason why is the environment doesn't support the potential for very thoughtful decision making.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, physical therapists are juggling multiple clients at the same time, and they have short windows of time to make decisions about what they want people to do. And when you have a scenario present itself where maybe you had a plan for someone was going to walk in the door, and maybe you have 2 or 3 clients that you're going to be seeing at the same time, you have a plan for what, client A and B and C are going to do. But then that person walks in the door, and how you expected them to be that day is totally different. Like they're either in a lot better condition than you were expecting them or a lot worse. Your plan kind of has to get modified on the fly.
Right.
And that's hard to do when you're trying to juggle multiple situations at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and then, phones are ringing in the clinic, whatnot. So I think a lot of times people end up getting prescribed exercises or treatments or interventions shooting from the hip, like you just said, or therapists, providers end up having clients do things just for the sake of buying themselves some time.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, we need to get you warmed up. So why don't you just go ride the recumbent bike here for the next 10 minutes? That'll warm you up. And then we'll get into what we were going to do. In all reality, do they really need to ride that recumbent bike in order to then do some clamshells or some bridges on the table? Probably not. Or do they really need to get warmed up to do some balance exercises for their ankle sprain? No, absolutely not.
Right.
It's a lot of times, I think it's those things are, I'll use the word prescribed because it's a medical environment, but just for the sake of buying some time. So that's why I feel like I'm fortunate to work in an environment, like you said, where I am one-on-one with people, and I'm surrounded by like-minded individuals who all have a very good coaching methodology and approach.
Yeah.
There are a lot of.
Let me interrupt for
just
a second. And you've always done a good job. You just did it the other day, and honestly, I'd tell the listeners probably even better because it's one of my deals. It's probably better than I do, and it's something that I admire about you. But you and I don't do it out of maliciousness, but you're much more open about. You'll have a client out there and you'll draw me into your process.
Oh, sure.
Whereas I need to do that a little bit more. Not that I don't want to, but I'm just so like laser focused sometimes, and I don't want to bother someone. Yeah. So I forget that. But you're always very good about what I like about here too. And I definitely need to start doing that more because we have a lot of different perspectives here that someone can see a blind spot that you don't have. And you've always been very good about kind of having a client out there that you're working with and kind of getting some of our perspectives on it.
Yeah.
And whether or not you do it, like that's the thing too, is at the end of the day, whether you do anything with that, you might sometimes and you might not, but just having the openness to get a different perspective on things, I think is unfortunately something even in the training community. And shit, maybe this is even why this is human condition too, is that, sometimes I don't know if it's, some of our own ego gets in the way to where we don't want to ask for help because it seems like, or not even ask for help, but you're asking for a different opinion may seem like weakness.
Yeah.
Which is of course not, it's silly, but I think we kind of can sometimes get caught in that we're all different trainers. We all have our own job. And if we're allowing someone else in, it somehow diminishes what we're doing, which is not quite the truth at all.
Yeah. It's kind of like you maybe some people worry about like giving off the perception of like they don't have the knowledge or something,
especially in front of the client,
because they're having to ask questions. And I think first off, appreciate the compliment of being collaborative, but second, I think some of that comes from one, I'm a very social person, and I like to try and involve the person that I'm working with in the social environment that is here. Or in any other clinic that I've been in. Like I want people to not feel like they're isolated in the, in the environment that they're in. I want them to feel like they're part of, even if it's their first day here or second day here. I want them to feel like they belong in the space. But I think sometimes I maybe do that to a fault in terms of like, I also don't want the person I'm working with to feel like we are interrupting their time by having other conversations go on. But I also want them to know that, like, hey, although I think I am a very knowledgeable individual, I don't know everything, and I don't catch everything on the first or second time seeing it. And I trust the inputs and opinions of other people who I respect, what they're seeing and what they think about us in this scenario too. So
but it's a very big strength that you have. Just wanted to let you know that,
well,
because we all have different personalities, right?
Totally.
Mine's never, but I'm more, I'm learning even after 20 years, man. I'm like, my personality tends to want to be in control of things. And I think a lot of humans do. I have that kind of, I hate using this is such a cop out bullshit word, but like I have that alpha mindset, which even saying that out loud sounds douchebaggish when you say it. Like I have that alpha kind of mindset to where I can, if I don't watch it, kind of stay in my own thing, right? So no, it's refreshing to be around people who are kind of trying to answer the same questions, because at the end of the day too, we're dealing with something that's not like, it's not like we're not cabinet makers, right? And what I mean by that is, woodworking's an art form, but at the end of the day, there's these black and white fundamentals. Not that there's not with the human body, but unlike a static piece of wood that you're working with, the human body, even with everything that we know, and I go back to what keeps me up at night. And I appreciate you saying I'm trying to be so thoughtful, but that it is honestly, it's sometimes I feel like it's slowed my progress in my career down, because I absolutely refuse to do things flippantly. Like I do want to give the best care, but when you're dealing with the human body, there are so many unbelievable factors involved. And most of them outside my control. Right. That's why behavioral psychology has become so important to me. I've been asking the question more these last few years, is like, great, all this wisdom and knowledge that we have, whatever, but how do you get someone to consistently apply that, right? And I think that's the next evolution of my business. But it's probably slowed down my development a little bit, because again, back to a lot of trainers, maybe even physical therapy, I kind of have rushed back against this whole like turnstile mentality where yes, I can bring a lot of people in and make more money in the short term, right? But like I've kind of refused to do it to a point, because I want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're bringing people along properly. And it's because of that obsession. Sometimes that obsession can bring a fear of growing or expanding, because I kind of want still, and it's this butting of head against something that one day I may have to decide, I'm butting my head against something that at the end of the day, after even 80 more, if I did this 80 more years, will I ever truly understand the interactions of the human body and why certain these things happen, so I'm trying to put together this Rubik's Cube sometimes that I feel like I don't know that I'll ever quite be able to put together. If that makes any sense.
It does make sense to me, because of like what you just said. There are so many things that are outside of any of our control, right? I cannot control directly what's going on in my client's life outside of our room, right? Outside of this treatment room, or outside of my hour I spend with them in a week, or anything like that, of that appointment. Now I can communicate with them when they're outside of here. I can give them suggestions and thoughts and recommendations, but I can't control how many hours of sleep they get per night, what their home life situation is like, what their kids' dynamics and their financial situation. Like there's so many things outside of my control or your control that impact how their body looks and feels and moves and performs and functions and all those words, and all of that stuff. So I feel like you said, when you're working with like cabinets or something where it's just like, okay, well, you gotta have this shape and you gotta have the hinges here and the screws there, like, that's how the door is going to open and close. The human body is like a big gray zone. It's not black, it's not white, it's all in the middle. And I feel like there's a lot of room for variability. And I think that's where some of the maybe like the butting of heads and stuff, or the egos and stuff get involved, is because there's so many different ways you could go about doing something, that a lot of different people may feel like they're right about the way that they do it compared to someone else. but both people might be very successful in the outcomes that they get or their clients get. And there's different ways to go about it. But you had mentioned that you kind of like to be in control of things. Do you think that is part of the reason behind why, you ended up kind of like going down this entrepreneurial path and having your own business anyways? Like when did you come across that of like, I think I'm going to start my own coaching business as opposed to, quote unquote, working for someone else?
Well, Andrew, I did it way too late. So for anyone listening to, one of the biggest, and we all have our own path and journey, right? I grew, just in case he ever hears this, I'm a very open person too, and learning to be, but just in case my dad ever hears this, love my dad, but and I'm not saying anything I haven't discussed with him, but
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't exactly learn, I didn't get a lot of that discipline model for me. So I've had, I'm a 40-year-old man who's still, I think I've picked up some things sooner than some people have. Unfortunately, you have some 60-year-olds who might as well be 15, right?
Sure.
And then and vice versa. But I can't compare my life to someone else, but I'll say I've always been the type of person who is wanted to answer your question, to kind of buck the system. Seems like a small thing. So for the list, I mean, I know this will be on YouTube, but I have a shaved head, but I'm a redhead, right? It's small little things in life, right? Redheads stand out. So I've always had this kind of like outsider mentality anyway, that I think has strengthened me and made me stronger. So I've always kind of wanted to kind of go my own way, do my own thing. I don't agree a lot with the fitness industry, a lot of things that are trending. I struggle right now too with one of my things is scaling my business, because I have some wonderful mentors that I'm working with right now, and and this seems crazy, right? But because they're right too. I know intellectually they're right, but there's this piece inside me where I'm being encouraged to, charge more up the price. And that is smart to a certain point, because you do want to get what you're worth. But I've always had this thing in the back of my mind where I want this to be accessible to people too. So I have this juxtaposition to where I obviously am a family man, have two wonderful daughters, a wife, and I do well for myself, and I like everyone else, will do better. I'm wanting to do better. So I'm not an idiot. I want to make as much money as possible, but also too, I want, and you can't be for everyone. That's the thing. You're like, if you're, you'll be for no one if you're for everyone. You have to be willing to burn some bridges, and you have to be willing to make some people angry. But I do kind of butt my head against making this whole like training thing, because you mentioned the insurance thing, right? Our basic ability to take care of ourselves should be this fundamental thing that's woven into our lives. It's not something that someone should have to super worry about paying for, because of this is such a wonderful, our body is such a wonderful resource, right? And you should have to pay for quality. That's not what I'm saying at all. But so that's an example of like, I've always kind of been the contrarian in a sense, to where I'm always questioning, this is how everyone else does it. But I've always kind of went a different way. And I've always kind of went a conflicting path sometimes, not to be an ass, but to, that's kind of my personality a little bit. So far it's served me well in some ways, and not in others. But that's why I wanted to be, I wanted, control may not be the wrong word, but I felt I wanted to become this business owner, because I felt there's something unique to me that I could offer, that wasn't going to manifest if I was having someone else write the script for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people, either in your position or the position I'm in, who have a service-based business that, their whole mission and vision, or whatever you want to call it, is they want the quality to be greater than the quantity. Like you don't want to scale just by getting more and more people in, churning and burning the system to make more money in the short term. Like you said, you want it to be high quality. But one thing that we've, been faced with as a challenge at Physio Room since I've known you. We've gone through some increases in our rates and our pricing structure, but that's all because as we have grown and we've added valuable assets to our team in terms of people, we've grown in terms of space and equipment, we've added more expenses, right? Whether you're talking about the labor expense, whether you're talking about equipment and rent expense. And in order to keep the quality of our service really, really high, we've had to raise the prices to cover some of those expenses. But I get what you're saying totally, that as you do that, there does come a tipping point where you may potentially price some people out that you really enjoy working with, or that you have a relationship or whatever. One of the ways that I know we've tried to kind of battle that is keeping some of our folks that have been like longtime clients of ours who have been with us through some of these growth phases, is keep them kind of grandfathered in, if you will. And I don't know why it's always grandfathered, maybe grandmothered in at at the price point that they are paying when we raise the rates. And like, as long as you continue to come here, we'll be loyal to you, like you've been loyal to us, and then raise it for new people. But I think that's a challenge, and that's a real thing. And prices are going up with inflation and all this stuff.
And that doesn't mean I don't raise my price. That's not what I'm saying. But it's always this conflict of that. But no, I've always wanted to kind of I guess this came from your original question. I've always kind of wanted to do my own thing, but you need people too. You need good. You can't be an island, too. That's one of the big things, is you need good people, good mentors around you. I think that's been my biggest thing, is I've surrounded myself with mentors and people, CEOs and people who run companies, that I make sure that routinely I'm being told things I probably don't want to hear. It's been one of the best things for me, is I do not, in my life, you can ask my wife, that I do not want to be surrounded by people who tell me things I want to hear.
Because if it's that idea of like, if you're always the smartest one in the room, right? Well, you're probably moving backwards and not moving forwards. And if no one ever disagrees with you, you don't grow. Like, get outside your comfort zone and stuff like that. What was I about to ask you? So before you decided to start your own business, go into, I'm going to go into coaching, training, run my own business, what were you doing before that? Because you said you got into this kind of late in the game.
What you mean, the business? Well, I was still training. I've been training for 20 years. So prior to that, I was at a club here in Colorado called Club Greenwood, which is not, in walking distance from where we're currently at right now. So I was there for a long. I was there for probably 8-9 years, and then prior to that, I was at another club in Cincinnati for about 7 years. So I ran the kind of club scene. Now the clubs that I was at, it was unique, is I was fortunate because I found kind of two unicorns, in that they were the best of both worlds, kind of a hybrid, because it wasn't like a 24-hour sort of situation. Like I in both scenarios, I still basically ran my own schedule, but you were still under the umbrella of that business and everything like that. You know what I mean? But the pros and cons to that, because you have a source of clientele and stuff like that. So and that's the biggest step away, is when you step away from that. Obviously, there's this mentality with a lot of people that all those clients are going to follow you, and that's a bad business plan. Is like, you want to start out thinking 0 people are going to follow. If people happen to follow you, great. But when you leave someplace, you have to have a plan that 0 people are going to follow you. So and start, what are you going to do? How are you going to build that up from there? That's a big mistake I've seen trainers make, is they'll leave somewhere, they have a good training business, and they make this false assumption that just everyone's going to follow you. And there's many reasons why that doesn't happen. And not all of them are because they don't like you. It's just human beings are funny, and they don't like change. And even the smallest change of location, or it interrupts their driving pattern, weird things will keep a person from following you. And a lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with whether they like you or not.
They may think you're wonderful, and maybe still even refer you people. But if like we sort of said, dealing with humans is this huge gray area. Nothing's black and white. So it's not just like an automatic, yes, I'm going to pull all of these individuals over with me, and they're just going to follow me down the street somewhere else. All right. Well, like, because we were talking about this a little bit off air, like all the people listening to this know, we like to keep these conversations on the code pretty like free flowing, not feel super scripted because life's not always going to run on a script. You said that this is the theme we've been talking about lately. You like to be kind of like in control of situations.
Yes.
But
to my detriment sometimes.
I'm right there with you. I like to be in control of things too. But what I would love to ask you is, I know you have 2 girls.
I do.
Of different ages, right? They're not like right next to each other in age.
8 and 1.5. Yeah.
Say that again.
8 and 1.5.
1.5.
Yeah.
So what I would love to know is, as you've been having this entrepreneurial journey, kind of running your own business, how have you seen how you have to run your business change as your personal life has changed? Because I know that's one thing that I think stresses a lot of people out who are entrepreneurs, start a business, is there seems to be this like, you're burning the candle at both ends, and it's like you have to push and pull, or this tug of war between your family life, your business life, your health and fitness, and it's hard to balance all of that as humans.
It's funny you ask that, because I feel like I'm in the middle of that storm kind of right now as we speak. I'm and maybe we touched. I didn't know if we touched on this, or I'm a power lifter as well. And
we haven't, but I would like to touch.
And the reason I'm bringing that up is that there's me always, I'm 40 years old, and there's this piece of me that's wanting to be in the best shape I've ever been in my life. But sometimes I let that, there's, seasons I let that fall to the wayside because I'm focused on, the family and the girls and or the business. Right. And so what's interesting, it's there's a wonderful book by Gary Keller called The One Thing. Good book, and like Keller Williams, the real estate organization, but Gary wrote a great book called The One Thing, and he discusses this. And I think it's a great thing that everyone needs to hear, and I totally agree, is the whole concept that a big myth is this balanced life. It's a myth. You can't. It's that same concept. If everything truly is in balance, you're not extraordinary anywhere. You can't be, right? So life is more of like a counterbalance. And he describes it in the book of like some things, it's like juggling, right? Yeah. You start to understand that some of the balls are rubber and some of them are glass. Family, things that are like your personal health. And I've had to learn this the hard way, because again, my mind, I'm kind of an analyzer. I can get in my own head a lot. Yeah. And so I've even let myself, as much as I love working out, and I'm saying this for everyone to hear, just being completely vulnerable. And I think a lot of trainers or other people would say this too. Like I've taken my eye off that ball sometimes too long, even though I know I shouldn't. Yeah. Right. It's the classic, like the gardener who has a horrible yard or has a horrible, like, it's that classic thing. And I don't know why we do it as human beings. Yeah. But I'm in the middle of that storm right now where I feel like I've taken my eye off of some of that stuff. But he talks about some of these the glass balls are your personal health, your family, and you can't let those balls drop. You can't get away from some of those things, your relationship, too long. Now you can ebb back and forth a little bit, but you can never stray too far away where you let it die. Yeah. Right. Because once those important things die, they're very hard to resurrect. Not impossible, but very hard to resurrect. Whereas some work things, as much as we don't want to admit it, most work things are rubber balls, meaning that if you let it drop, it'll bounce back. Right. So I'm really trying to learn that myself right now. And honestly, like I said, right in the middle of it, of trying to understand the counterbalancing, not balance life, but how long to stay away from things. Yeah. How long to stay over here. And then when do I come back? I think that's like the secret that I'm trying to figure out right now is not trying to have a balanced life, but I'm trying to prioritize what are the most important things and how long do I have discipline to focus on it. And then knowing when to come back to the things to not let something die. Does that make sense?
It makes great sense to me.
And I admittedly don't have that figured out right now. And I'm so happy you're asking that question, because like I feel like I'm legit in that ocean right now of trying to like figure that out. because I'm feeling that itch 2.5 years in of like, what's my next thing?
Yep.
I've been doing this 20 years. I'm tired of, I just admit I'm tired of like coming in every day. I love my clients, but I need a new, I need a new scale. I need a new scale where I don't have to be, because I want to do some other things, right? And I still want to make a huge impact, but not have to be face to face quite as much. And that sounds awesome, but it takes a lot of upfront work. And this whole thing about passive income, it's nothing's passive, right? Passive income only comes after a tremendous amount, what they call passive income, you know, where you're setting up systems and stuff like that. Nothing's passive. I think a lot of people have this idea that like, it sounds wonderful because it sounds like you don't have to do anything and you're making all this money. It's not. There's a mountain of stuff that you have to do in order to do that. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And I'm trying to climb that mountain right now. Like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And I think anybody who is very successful, you know, maybe I'll put successful in air quotes because it's all relative, right? What someone thinks is successful is different than what someone else does. But
true.
Anyone who is, at that point where they have built something to the point where they have a passive or residual income stream would tell you exactly the same things what you just said. This took a lot of damn work to get to this place. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and created a login on some website and all of a sudden I was generating passive income stream. That's not the way that it works. And I think anybody would tell you the same thing. I think the book that you mentioned is great. And if I don't forget to, I'll include that in the show notes for this show. So that if you haven't read that, The One Thing book, you definitely should. I agree with you totally on the idea that, it is a bit of a myth to have this like, I hate the phrase work-life balance. It pisses me off because what that means to me is that like you can just kind of turn the switch on and off on these things. And I kind of look at it as, well, I want to be balanced in the sense of I want to put an importance on relationships outside of work and on family and on my professional life and on my fitness. But it's not like, I just forget about the other ones when I'm focusing on the one that you're always trying to juggle all of these things. And I think if you can, of course, some people probably are more enjoy their whatever their career or their place of employment is. Some people probably enjoy that more than others. And others view it as like hey, I just got to check this box to get my paycheck. But if you're living out something that is like your passion and your purpose, putting a ton of focus on that and being really involved in it doesn't mean that that you don't have balance, right? If you really enjoy what you're doing and you can structure your life around things that you are really passionate about, then like you can kind of pull that all in. And I know a lot of people who are in entrepreneurial situations try to do that. Like their family and their business are very like all wrapped up in the same thing.
Right.
And, maybe they bring their child to work, or maybe it's an office or a facility where they bring their dog with them and their dog is like part of their staff. Basically. Like they're always there and always around.
We've had some dogs in here from time to time.
Dogs inside of Lion's Den. But I mean, it's just like, I agree. I think it's a myth that you can just be like in this sense of balance where you don't have to pay attention to everything.
Yeah. And, Andrew, to answer your original question is that's part of the things I've struggled with is probably in this last year, I actually have taken more time at home to, because I have a 1.5-year-old and we're done with kids unless there's a surprise, like Adrian and I are like, we're done. So, I realize this is my last opportunity to be a part of that process and be there. And so I've felt internally as a man, a little bit of guilt about that. And it probably has kicked my business in the ass a little bit. And that's part of why I said I'm in the middle of this ocean right now, trying to figure out, okay, I may have, the family was important and I may have left some things, I may have taken some things off the burner a little too long, but I am a huge believer in, and again, in this counterbalancing, not balance, but I'm still trying to figure out where to be. But I wouldn't trade, like the thing is there's some angst that it's probably caused me from a professional standpoint in this last year and a half. But man, there's been like this great joy of just being around a little bit more, and that I've taken advantage of, and I've loved it. And I don't think, like, if something were to happen to me tomorrow and I was like, you know, I didn't have much left, I don't think, like, on my deathbed I know for a fact what I would be remembering.
Yeah.
And it's not, as much as I love my job, as much as I love what I do, it's not these struggles in the workplace. I'd be remembering those moments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that goes back to your original question of how I've dealt with, like, the family side of things. Honestly, lately I've been taking more time with family.
Yeah.
And you know, it's been awesome. And I'm still trying to figure out the right, and I don't even want to say balance anymore, because we're saying, but I'm trying to figure out that right amount of time to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I like that. It's like, your perspective seems really good to me, being someone who doesn't have kids right now, but the plan is to, and well, to have kids and potentially two of them, but kind of like you, but yeah, I mean, I think, so let's go down, before we talk about powerlifting, let's go down that path a little bit of what you said of, you feel like you've maybe taken your foot off the gas just a little bit on the fitness side and business side too much, where, you know, maybe your fitness level isn't quite where you want it to be, or maybe your business isn't quite where you want it to be. And I want to talk more about the fitness side of things, because I think that happens a lot, in whether we're talking about healthcare and we're talking about physicians or nurses or physical therapists, personal trainers, whatever that might be, where the person, you know, the physical therapist or the personal trainer, you have some who aesthetically are in very good shape. They're very fit individuals. You have some who are not, and they don't lead what they, you know, they don't practice what they preach. Let's put it that way. But I know I've been guilty of this, where I know a lot of my clients and clients that I've worked with in the past are much better about doing the things that I ask them to do to help with whatever they're dealing with than I am about dealing with my own stuff. So I don't always make the best client. And what I've always kind of thought is, well, it's because, you know, it's what I do all day and it's not what I want to do when I go home, type of thing. Like, okay, I helped everyone else try to address their problems and try to provide solutions to help them and guide them. I want someone else to be the one that guides me, right? Like, I need help from someone else. And then I'm more likely to do it. Like, if I schedule myself for an appointment with another professional, another coworker of ours, I'm more likely to do what they say than what I know I probably should have already been doing. So
that's so true.
I don't know. I guess what my question is for you is, maybe one, why do you think that happens? Like, why do you think we have physicians who are trying to preach healthy lifestyles to patients, but they are so out of shape themselves? Or why do we have nurses who know that smoking cigarettes is bad for you, but they work in a super stressful environment and they still smoke cigarettes themselves? Like, why do we have this kind of like conundrum of someone who works in a health type of role, maybe not leading the lifestyle that they're trying to impart on other people?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is probably, like, number one, it's so much easier to see someone else's problems than it is your own. Right. So when that's number one, is that, and I think we've all noticed that, it's, you have a friend who has a, you know, you have that friend who has an issue, and it's, you know, when they tell you that issue, it's so easy for you to diagnose that issue, and so easy for you to go home and talk to the wife or the girlfriend or whatever about, can you believe so and so? Like, isn't it obvious why they're having problems, right? I think we just tend to do that, right? It's so much easier to see their issues, and so much harder to see ourselves. So much harder to see ourselves. So the other issue might be that when you're in the fitness industry and your day is surrounded by telling people what to do, that maybe subconsciously, and I don't know how to word this, maybe subconsciously they themselves may feel like it's too much to live up to, and that they, for lack of a better word, kind of sabotage the whole thing because of this this, not to get too psychobabble, but there is some truth to it. You tend to, I'm a big believer, you tend to act out what you truly believe about yourself, not what you tell others, not what you say, because anyone can say good stuff. Like you can get on podcasts or on video, or you talk to someone, it's very easy to say things that other people want to hear.
Yeah.
But you tend to, when no one else is around, you tend to act out what you truly believe about yourself. It's whatever your standard is, that's what you'll live up to.
Yeah.
If you have a low standard, that's what you'll live up to.
Sure.
Right. So we do a lot of things that's why I think it's weird. I've been like thinking about this a lot lately too. It's weird, and to make a bigger comment on just society now too. We live in this weird time to where like we do things based on feeling, and that's a really horrible way to live life, because most of the time we actually do a lot of things that we feel like doing that are not in our best interest. And the reason we do it is again, we're always trying to reach for some pleasure and avoid some pain. But a lot of what we believe in our prime, I don't know if you've seen studies on this and on kind of how easy it is for human beings to be primed by their environment subconsciously. But when you deep down believe something, not what you tell someone, but when you deep down believe you're not worth it or whatever, or that something's scary or fearful, like your body, you feel that on the inside. And I think we're primed by our environment a lot, or how we grew up, in a lot of things, that even if we believe something's in our best interest, we don't always act on it, because we haven't dealt with the truth. We're still believing some, whatever you call it, a limiting belief or this lie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think we're almost starting to go down the path of like, what is your self-talk, right? Like, is it positive self-talk? Is it negative self-talk? What do you say in your mind when no one else is around, type of thing? And you're not talking out loud to somebody. And, we've had a psychotherapist on this podcast in the past. We refer a lot of people to Lauren. So if you haven't heard it, go check out the podcast about secure base mental health. So I think the title is Finding Your Secure Base Mental Health.
I've been listening to that one yet. I bet that one would be good.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I bet that's interesting.
It's awesome. I've probably said this to multiple people, but that was one of my favorite conversations to have. Part of that is because I've gotten to know her a bit from seeing her in the office as a client and whatnot. We've spent a lot of time together before we actually recorded that podcast, kind of similar with you, where we've talked a lot. But as I heard you say that, I was kind of thinking about the studies, like you mentioned. There definitely are studies that talk about how multiple things. One, what we think impacts how we feel, but also even there's studies that talk about how our body position and our presence. I think that's the name of the book, Presence. I want to say Cuddy is the last name of the author, but it's about how like the body position that you hold yourself in impacts your physiology and your mindset as well. So there's a ton of data on some of that stuff, but yeah, it's so hard to see within yourself. And I think I'm thinking back to some like, college track workouts, right? And maybe what was my mindset about like what I was actually capable of compared to maybe what other people thought of me. And I remember, for whatever reason, I'm remembering a workout that we did in college where it was like a mid-distance workout. I ran 4 and 800s, and there was this other athlete in our conference who it just always seemed like I couldn't beat him, right? I could not beat this guy, whether it was a 400, whether it was an 800. And he was like, maybe had the appearance of like this computer nerd type of thing, but he was just a hell of a runner on the track. He had this amazing kick at the end of his races. And it's like, man, I just couldn't beat this guy. And I was doing this workout, and I remember, I think it was one where I probably let what was in my head telling me about how tired my legs were or how fatigued I was stop me from getting the quality out of that workout that my coach was trying to push me into doing.
Right.
And it was all mental, right? It was all me telling myself, no, I can't push through this. I'm too tired. I can't do this. And I ended up, I think letting some of that get to me, where then I ended up probably only finishing like 3/4 of that workout. And then I was like, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm just not feeling my body, and my performance isn't feeling like I can't do this, when really I probably could have. And I think it was a lot of like what I was telling myself in my head that prevented my body from doing what I was trying to do.
Yeah. And you said what you think. These studies show that, what you think or what you focus on manifests into emotions, or what you feel.
Yes.
Right. And emotions shouldn't be taken for granted. They should be counselors, but not something that you're imprisoned by necessarily. Right. But if that's true, right, which I think it is, you believe that too, right? What you think. But the truth is, what makes that so dangerous is that a lot of times what we think is wrong, though. Mm-hmm. A lot of what we think is not
like
right.
An irrational thought. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm saying it's a bad practice. And I'm telling myself this too. It's a bad practice to always go by what you feel. Yes. I'm not saying ignore feelings, but it's a horrible practice to be like, my modus operandum, is my MO is to live life, and I'm just going to do what I feel. And I'm not talking about the kind of gut instinct that people, because I think there's intuition that we have sometimes too, that we should act on more. There's this like higher intuition that I think a lot of people have, that I think most people will hopefully understand. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just these base kind of like, I just don't feel like doing. Like, you very rarely are probably going to feel like working out.
Yeah.
You're probably actually, most of the good things in life, you're probably the things that end up having great long lasting results, not short-term results, but long lasting results. Most of those things you don't ever feel like doing.
Nope.
So I think that a lot of our thoughts, that's the thing that we have to uncover, is like, because I think a lot of our thoughts are primed the wrong way. They're lying to us. Yeah. Once you can crack that, I think you unlock a lot of potential in what you can do in your belief system, because you do start fundamentally changing that deep core belief, and not what you tell other people. Yeah. What you tell that's a dime a dozen. You can tell people anything. It doesn't mean anything. Well, and what do you believe and do?
If you have any doubt about that, I mean, we talked earlier on this show about the NFL season starting and stuff. Well, you can tell people anything. What do some of these coaches walk up to the microphone during press conferences and say? That's not what they actually feel or actually believe. They say stuff to solve the question that was presented to them, or get someone to write something down on their news article. But it's just words, right? At the end of the day. Well, I think this conversation that we just had makes me want to be quicker. I don't know if quicker is the right word, but makes me feel even stronger that I want to get somebody on this show who, like, that's really what we talk about for the episode, is like this idea of self-talk. Sports psychology was one of my favorite classes, elective, that I took when I was in school. And we're going to have a deeper conversation about that. But before we even consider wrapping things up, I want to go a little bit down the powerlifting route. Because you've participated in powerlifting. You just did a competition not that long ago. But for people listening to this that maybe they have an idea about what powerlifting is, but maybe they don't really know because they haven't done it. So from like a basic standpoint, first off, what is powerlifting compared to other types of training and Olympic lifting and CrossFit and all that stuff? Sure. What is powerlifting? And then when did you get into it, and how has involvement in powerlifting kind of like shaped some of what you've done the past several years?
No problem. Powerlifting is probably a misnomer of a name anyway, because it's Olympic lifting. So let me back up to clarify. Olympic lifting is obviously like the clean and jerk and the snatch, right? Those are the two base competitive movements of Olympic lifting. So that's what you'll see during the Olympics. Powerlifting is not in the Olympics. It's in the World Games, and it consists of 3 lifts: the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. And those two words get obvious a lot of times mixed together. People will call Olympic lifting powerlifting. They are different things, but whatever. It's semantics. Most people, they're not in it enough so it doesn't it bothers me a little, but they don't mean any harm by it. But they're two very different sports.
Yes.
So you compete, you get 3 attempts at a max lift in the squat, you get 3 attempts at a max lift in the bench, and then 3 attempts in the deadlift. And you can only go up in weight, you can never go down. So pick your attempts is very important, because if you miss, you may have attempts left, but you can't go down.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to pick those strategically, and then your best lift of each one of those are tallied together for what's called your total. The reason I said it's a misnomer is powerlifting, what matters at the end of the day, provided you follow the rules, is that you get the weight up, even if it was slow as molasses, right? And power tends, power is force times distance over time. Power itself has a very definite time element to it of how fast. So it probably should be labeled something. I mean, Olympic lifting honestly is more powerlifting than that, but
it's more a demonstration of pure strength.
Yeah,
right?
That's what power. It's pure. Just no matter how long it took you to get it, could you move a weight from point A to point B within the rules?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I got into that in 2016. So I was a late adopter of that when I was 34. And I did the Colorado State Championships last year, was 4th in the state as the oldest competitor. I was 39 at that point. I plan on keep competing the rest of my life. I compete in what's called the the raw category, which we don't use any extra gear like multiply type things. Not that that's bad, because that gets a big conversation going to. There are apples and oranges. There's something called geared powerlifting, where you'll use bench shirts and these other types of gear it's a performance aid, but you still have to really know how to use it. You have to actually still be pretty damn strong to do it. People don't understand it, but raw, we don't use any of that stuff, and I'm not gonna start comparing which one's better or not, because that's a useless argument. They're just two different sports, and you might like one. You might like one flavor or the other.
I mean, I kind of analogize that to, in the bodybuilding fitness competitor world, there's categories that are raw, or like you don't have any sort of supplementation aid. You're not taking steroids or hormone supplementation. And then there's categories that are, and it's apples and oranges. Or, what's been popular here over the last couple of years are these carbon plated running shoes. And it's not like you can just throw a bench shirt on and all of a sudden your bench goes up by 200 pounds. Well, you can't throw on a carbon plated running shoe and all of a sudden you're this world-class marathon athlete or 10K runner either. You have to be a pretty damn good runner for that carbon plated shoe to make very much of a performance benefit to you, like it does for some of these elite people. They're still elite without that carbon shoe.
Exactly. They're very different sports. No, but got in that in 2016. So late to the game, but I've loved it. I always wanted to compete in something. I had fought MMA as an amateur prior to my first girl being born. Got out of that because thought it was probably a good idea to stop getting punched and kicked in the head with all the CTE kind of conversations that were coming out. And then previous to that, my athletic career ran track, played football. And so I'm the type of person who needs to have kind of a purpose of competition and stuff like that. But powerlifting, I've always been naturally strong. So you still have to work hard, but it made sense. Powerlifting made sense for me.
Sure.
But I will tell you, it's taught me a lot about, I'm a big form nut too. It's taught me a lot about how powerful just being strong is.
Yeah.
But I've also learned too is the need for, as a powerlifter, and I made the mistake, or have made the mistake, where I left out a lot of other qualities too, where I was just probably too much into the strength, and you need to come back into making sure your conditioning stays at we talk about that counterbalance again. Really, it's a counterbalance. You can't stay too far away from some of the conditioning aspects. You can't let mobility suffer at all, because it's not just about how heavy you can lift. You have to have a good, what I call a root system. You have to have a really good, with a lot of my lifters now, we make sure we build up their root system. And if you know anything about how plants grow, the roots stay underground for a while. And a lot of my people don't lift the weight that they want at first, because I'm not willing for that tree to come up only to topple over because it doesn't have an adequate root system underneath it.
Yeah. When you just said, like, coming back to that counterbalance, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Like, if we take away the idea of like looking at everything in your life and we just look at that bucket of fitness, it is really challenging to be a very well-rounded athlete, be very strong, very powerful, or be able to, move quickly, to be mobile, to be agile, to, it's hard to demonstrate a high quality in all of these different facets of fitness. And that's one thing that I think, like you said a while back, you said, I've been doing this for a few years, I'm ready for my next challenge type of thing. That's one thing in fitness that, like, I struggle when I don't have quite a bit of variety involved in my fitness lifestyle, which is why I think part of the reasons, aside from those of you who know I have this Achilles thing going on that's hindering my running.
You've gotten very strong recently.
Yeah, but I think, and I think that's one of the things that has probably held me back from maybe doing a marathon or something like that, because I know it, in order to perform in that at the quality of which I want to, because I don't really care about just like saying I completed a marathon, because it's something I know I could do if I wanted to.
Right.
That doesn't excite me. Just getting a participation medal doesn't really excite me.
That doesn't stretch you. Completing a marathon doesn't stretch you.
No,
because you could do it.
If I'm going to run a marathon, I want to run it at a particular pace and do well, and do decently well for my age group. I don't expect to win the thing or anything like that, but I know the time that it takes in just running to perform at that level. And in order to spend the amount of time training for that, I know I'm going to have to give up on other things like cycling or hiking or lifting or playing pickup basketball or rec league softball or whatever. It had like having such a variety of stuff that, I try to just be pretty good at a lot of that stuff, but maybe not go down the fully dedicated to one side. Now, with powerlifting, you said you've got your squat, your bench, your deadlift, and then your scores on each of those get compiled to a total. I know this is going to be a very person-dependent question, but on an average, for say someone performed like pretty well in powerlifting. What relative to your body weight are you kind of, because I know it's body weight dependent or size dependent, like kind of what is like a good score? Like what is someone shooting for?
Yeah, it's a great question. You'll have a lot. Are you talking in the world of powerlifting or compared to, if we were to kind of compare it to the average population?
Well, maybe let's do both. Maybe let's say in the world of powerlifting, like what is a good score? And then for like an average population, like if you combine those lifts, what might someone be shooting for?
So I would say, let me use pounds here. Like in powerlifting, I compete in well, it used to be the 93 kilo. They've changed it down to 90 kilo now. I used to compete at 205 and now it's going to be down to like 197. They recently changed that, but and then you got the bigger guys and you got guys smaller than me, right? So like my all-time best is 1,350 pounds between the three. Which compared to what's weird, compared to most of the population, it puts me in some of the very small percentage of humanity as far as strength. In powerlifting, there's, as you know, with most sports, then there's that extra tip of the spear. So I'm very, very strong, but I'm not special strong. And I got into the game late too. Now, where this gets interesting is I just now entered the Masters territory, which is going to bump my placement in the world, because you don't have too many people competing at that age. So that's a test of longevity and it's relative, whatever. But to put in normal people, it sounds weird, but the average person, you're not going to, I think they can, but the average person, let's say male, is going to have to work really, really hard to get 1,000 pound total. And it can be done. It's not beyond someone's genetics or anything like that. But I put and it depends on size too. And obviously, if you have a 250-pound man, 1,000-pound is going to be much more easy to accomplish. But I'm talking about someone who's more my size. You got, you're going to have to work intelligently and be truly training to reach about the 1,000-pound mark, right? And then if you to really start winning or getting close to the podium in raw, you're going to need to be approaching 1,300, 1,400 pound total plus. And the elite guys in my weight class, there are just monsters out there who are the 16, 17, 1,800. One of the best in my weight class is, I think someone did get finally in my weight class a 2,000-pound total. Now, 2,000-pound total is not it's still special, but it's a little bit more prevalent when you start getting into the higher weight classes, the big guys. But even a 2,000-pound total is very special. But there's some animals out there in my weight classes, a few who can get in that 16, 17, 800, 1,800. So me being at 1,350, I'm trying to press. My next goal would be to get into the 14, 15. That's putting me in a good place, but not national. Still not tip of the spear level.
Yeah, I think that's super impressive to lift that amount of weight. But yeah, I totally get what you mean. Like, you might be considered, in your category really good, but those like peak of the peak type of people are just, in any sport or activity, they're on a different level.
And you got to think in powerlifting too, that's not adding together what you've done at different days and what your all-time best is that you have to do that. You have to do that in one day and have the energy to perform those max lifts under judging on the one day. Like the bench press, for instance, there's a pause. You have to wait for it's not a bounce. There's rules to the game too that make it they're more controlled lifts. Squat, you're judged by depth and stuff like that, which is one of the reasons it hasn't made it to the Olympics, because it's too subjective. So they've been fighting to get it into the Olympics, but it is in the World Games.
Which, if you've ever done, and someone listening to this, if you've ever actually done a maximum effort lift and truly pushed yourself to try to see on whatever lift, whether we're talking bench, typically it's bench, squat, and deadlift. You may max out on other things too, but those are the large three. It takes a lot out of you. It is extremely taxing, even though we're talking about, you've got to build up, and then we're talking about one repetition of something. It's not like you're doing tons of reps. It is extremely taxing, and you often are quite exhausted for a long time.
Well, in the meet, there's tons of poundage that we're lifting prior to ever getting out on the platform, because you're in the back room
prepping,
doing all your warm-ups, and you're typically, everyone's a little different in that, but I'm typically opening up at 89 or 90% of what I'm intending on doing as my opener, and then I'll jump up to about 95%. And I use a little auto regulation based on how hard I perceived that lift was on how much I go up after that. But but prior to ever doing your first attempt, you're still back there, on all three lifts, lifting a lot of weight. So I enjoy it. Powerlifting to watch is incredibly boring. I'm just gonna say, like, it's not like strongman events and stuff like that, because of their variety and stuff. I personally enjoy it. Powerlifting, I think this is changing a little bit. It's becoming bigger, but it's still very much a niche sport. Unless you know someone there, it's not. I'm under no delusion that people are clamoring to be like, let's really sit down for these next couple hours and watch this person do a max attempt. However, it's very, it's a sport I love. It's very rewarding for me, but I'm under no delusion that it's football or anything like that.
Now, like you said, it takes a lot of work and efforts to get for the average male to get into that 1,000-pound club. And I've told this story a few times for whatever reason, and I think I understand why. Now, when I think about sport specificity, we didn't deadlift a lot in football.
Yeah.
We did a lot more squats, a lot more cleans,
Yep.
complexes, like quicker movements and stuff. But of course, in order to do some of those, you have to pick the weight up off the floor.
Yeah.
So it would probably be good to learn how to really properly deadlift. My squat max in football in college was heavier than it is now, although I'm probably getting pretty close back to what I was. My bench press probably is about the same. And I never deadlift maxed until
recently,
probably like a year ago. And with those lifts that I did a year ago, my max in those, I just cracked into that 1,000 pound club.
But you work, but I know you.
Yeah.
You're constantly working, and that was my point.
Yes, totally.
Is that most males are not going to accidentally.
Yeah. No.
Most males, unless, I mean, there are some genetic freaks out there, but most males are not just going to accidentally fall into 1,000 pound total. Was my point.
Yeah, I would agree totally.
Right?
Unless you're just a big human and you're strong, then that's maybe different.
That's all I meant. Like if you work hard, I mean, you're a very strong guy. Like, and you're lighter than I am, so you're doing very well, and obviously you work very hard. But that was my point: is those numbers, you're typically not going to find someone just falling into like, oh my god, I can do this.
Now, I know there is no perfect answer to what I'm about to say, so we don't have to go like too far down some like explanation. This is a very gray area question I'm going to ask you. But for the average person, I've seen people out there saying things. Now, these are people that are training, but they're like, hey, I'm trying to work towards being able to squat 2.5 times my body weight, or I'm trying to deadlift 3 times my body weight. I'm trying to bench press
3 times is a hell of a deadlift.
Yeah, I'm trying to bench press 1.5 times my body weight, or whatever. On some of those lifts, bench, deadlift, squat, what is like a good number that someone who is just training, but they're not necessarily trying to compete in powerlifting, but they're wanting to just be a really fit individual and sustain themselves from like a longevity standpoint? What is maybe a percentage that they might shoot for, or a body weight relativity that they
and then this is obviously, don't take this with a grain of salt.
Absolutely.
This is completely arbitrary, but I think if you're talking about just, it sounds like to have a good base level of strength and to function in life, like if you can do this pain-free and it doesn't jack you up, I think like a two body weight deadlift is a really, and I don't think, and if you don't hit exactly that, that's fine. But I'm two times your body weight is not this insurmountable thing that you need some special genetics to hit. But I would even say, fine, I'll even give a little spectrum. If you're a time and a half, like, let's say even 1.75 to 2 times your body weight, you're able to pick up off the ground at some point in your life. That means you put a little work in. You put some work in, and that you're going to you're probably not going to provide your form's good. You're probably not going to come across a situation in life to where you're going to jack yourself up picking something up. Yeah. Right. The squat, I'd put that again at maybe a time and a half body weight. Right. So a 200 pound male, I don't see any reason why at some point in their life with a little work can squat 300 plus. Right. And again, these are completely, my opinion. It's not some magical thing. You might be a little bit above or below. Yeah,
this isn't written in a book.
And then the bench press, the bench press is the one that's most, a lot of people who don't compete don't understand this, but the bench press is highly, highly affected by your body weight. Yes. So if you, for instance, are going through a phase where you're cutting, right? You're, of all of the big 3, the one that will be most heavily affected by any body weight changes is the bench press. And it's a weird phenomenon, even gaining weight. So like guys who, and I'm not saying go for this because it's not the way to go, but even a guy who gets fatter all of a sudden, it's a weird thing. Their bench press can go up a bit, and conversely, if they lose some weight. But for the bench press, at least body weight, maybe 1.25 body weight is something that I think is manageable for most people. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, of course. Just like Shaun
and you could be time and a half, but I would say those would be, I think what Andrew asked is for a pretty, at least decently fit life. Yeah. Now those numbers are not going to win you any powerlifting competitions or anything like that. But yeah.
I think I agree with those because, and like Shaun said, it's not like that is like written down in stone. That's the Bible of what you should be able to lift relative to your size.
Yep.
Everybody has their own situation.
Yep.
Everybody's goals, training history is different. And, depending what you've been doing with your body, you may or may not even be close to those things,
Yep.
right? If you've been training for marathons, not spending much time in the weight room, hopefully you are lifting weights. If not, let's talk about that. But, maybe you're not close to those things, but you might be a damn good runner.
Yeah.
Now, conversely, it'd be the exact opposite. Most powerlifters are probably not going to place very well in their category for running a race,
Probably
right?
not.
Because that's not what they're training for. They might do really well in a short sprint race,
Right.
but probably not in a local neighborhood 10K. But no, I think that's great. I think that just gives people some context.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if anybody listening to this show is training in powerlifting or considering even doing a powerlifting competition, but they might want some numbers relative to their situation. Like, hey, what's kind of just like a good level of strength for someone who is training. But I agree with you. It'd be really hard to hit some of those numbers if you weren't putting some time and some effort in. It's probably unlikely that someone who is, unless they're one of those genetic freaks, someone who's not lifting weights.
And those people exist. There's going to be people who have never worked.
Most people just aren't going to walk in the weight room and be able to squat 2 times their body weight if they haven't been doing squats.
Yeah,
right?
It's like those bastards with giant calves who've never trained calves before in their life. It's
and I know some people that train their calves all the time and they just can't seem to grow much of a defined calf muscle. But no, Shaun, this was awesome. And I think you have like I said, you have a lot of thought behind why you have people do what you ask them to do from a training standpoint, but you obviously have a lot of thought behind some of your answers to some of these questions. Not like you're just like, spitting words out of your mouth without thinking about them. So I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Coming in here to do this podcast. I like to ask this question. My intention on this show was to ask this to everybody, but I have gotten away from that because I've gotten distracted by some of the conversations we've had. But since I remembered here, of course, this show is called The Code, a guide to health and human performance. So what we're talking about is health, performance, wellness, things that impact our lives. If someone asked you, like, what is your code or what is your guide to giving people tips on how to take care of themselves in a, obviously the answer could be really long, but like, what are some of the keys that you would suggest to people, or keys that you try to live by to your code
to take care of yourself,
to health and human performance? Yeah.
Oh man, such a loaded question.
Very big question. Yeah.
So I like distilling things. What's that saying? Like, genius is taking the complex and making it simple. So like, I have to go back and think, what is the one, what's that one thing? What's weird, and this is going to sound so maybe too simple, but I would say, I could give you the special, like, workout, right? I could give you the special like, we could talk those specific things, but I think kind of what we were implying today is that I think us human beings, in order to have a better life from a fitness standpoint, is I think what a lot of people are lacking is intentionality. And intentionality comes from having a purpose. And I know this has been written in every, all these books and stuff like that. I think it's so prevalent. There's different ways of putting it. It's like, what's your, Simon Sinek talks about your why. And there's different like, of these gurus have, talked about it in different ways, but they're basically saying the same thing. But I guess the reason I'm saying is because just because it's a boring answer doesn't make it any less true. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that I think for most people, their success or failure and whether they stay fit has everything to do with the purpose of how they're going to intentionally use their time. Because when you have purpose, then you can dial down what your priority is. So I think what keeps so many people kind of not getting what they want out of life is because they're so easily distracted.
Yeah.
They don't know what to say yes to, or they say yes to everything and not the right thing. Right. So I think the answer to the code, so to speak, of that is the answer to that code, or the code itself rather, to unlock that box, if you will, is that you have to sit. It's something so simple, but I don't think too many people actually do. So you have to spend some time and space alone and really hash that out. And I think people hear that and they'll stop in their mind for a little bit and they'll think about, okay, this is what my purpose is. But what I'm saying is, like, it actually takes a block of time. I think you have to sit down and block out time like you would a meeting.
Yeah.
A meeting with yourself, to where you're getting down and dirty with, like, what am I doing? I don't think until you do that, I think a lot of people who struggle with fitness is they're doing something they think they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And they haven't really soul searched and see if that's where they're at right now. Is that where they want their direction to go? Is that how they want to spend their time?
Yeah.
I think they lack purpose and intentionality.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And what it made me think of while you were talking about that, like with the purpose and the intentionality, is if we're talking about exercise, are you exercising, or are you working out, or are you training? Because there's a big difference when, like, I hear people who are more intentional about what they're doing refer to their workouts or their sessions as training sessions. Like, do you want to come with me tomorrow afternoon to train?
Right.
Not to work out or go to the gym,
or to exercise.
Yeah. It's like they're talking about doing something that's planned and structured, and there's a purpose behind it, or a method behind it, and that's training. That's kind of what you're talking about. And I think anyone who has reached any level of, like, there again, we use the term success, any level of success in something, there probably is a lot of purpose and planning and training behind it. They're not just going through the motions and showing up at the gym and just doing stuff. They're probably not going to reach that pinnacle.
Well, it's easier to get up when there is that.
Yep.
It's much easier to not get up and get distracted when it's sorry, but I don't want to take up too much time on this, but when it's and again, and by the way, like, for the listeners, if you watch it, like, a lot of this stuff I'm saying, again, feel very much in the middle of the woods with some, even though I've learned, like, I think as human beings, we should be, this isn't coming out of me as someone who's
got it all figured out.
Any of this is, I'm literally walking this right now.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think the difference is too, is that, like, a lot of people hope, and there's like, if you were to sit right now and hope something happens, and if our listeners, if the listeners right now did that, and think of something that you hope for, and really feel it and hope it, that's a very different feeling than expecting something. If you were to sit down and expect that same thing, and then, like, play it out in your head and you expect it to happen, one feels passive. Like, hoping is very passive, because hoping keeps the door open for it may not happen. Expecting something to happen is purpose driven. Expecting something to happen is because it's who you are. This is how it is. Things may not always work out well. It may be a bumpy road, but I know at the end I'm getting there, versus I kind of doing this, but you know what, if something comes along that looks pretty, I might go this way. Right. So I think you have to be very expectant, and I think you can only be expectant when you have a very clear, like, purpose and direction of where you're going. And I see that with a lot of my clients. I think, honestly, I mean, we'll talk behind the scenes, but I always love suggestions on, with behavioral psychology, is that's the big thing, is getting clients to have that same belief system. With, like, they're expecting this to be a good thing. They're expecting to celebrate their body, and this doesn't have to be. This isn't punishment.
Right? Oh man. Yeah, that's for sure. That's a whole nother conversation we could have. But and I think, there's a huge difference between hoping and expecting. And if you expect something to take place or come true or whatever, you expect something to happen, you're going to do more of the groundwork that makes it more likely that outcome is going to be what it is. Whereas if you hope, you're just, like, leaving it up to fate at that point. Like, in it, it might happen, it might not. But if you expect it, you're going to do things that make it more likely that that's going to happen.
No one's ever gotten on a plane hoping to get on a plane. Everyone expects to get on that plane. It's weird. Like all of our other appointments that we make with ourselves, sometimes working out and stuff. And I'm guilty of it too. Like some of these things that we make appointments with ourselves that we say are important, we don't approach it like we would getting on a flight. Like it's weird with flights. They're so like permanent, and you need to be on that plane to get somewhere, or else so there's a lot of pain in the ass if you don't. Like most people like won't use the same excuses. Like if they have a flight to catch, it's funny, you won't hear a lot of the same excuses that come up if someone needs to train, or they need to work out, or they need to eat well. Is because you made that appointment and you expect to be on that plane. You don't go hoping I might catch it. I might catch it.
Maybe I'll make it.
That's how we live life, though. We live life hoping that we might catch the plane. That's not ever how we fly. We expect it, and we get pissed if something else gets in the way. We expect to be on that plane.
I mean, I like to be on time for things, but there's not much that I am more on time for than making a flight. Sometimes to a fault. Sometimes I'm there way too early, and then I walk laps around the airport because I'm not going to sit still.
That's because we know where we're going. We know there's a flight destination. We know where it's going. It's funny. Purpose does that to us.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, Shaun, if somebody was listening to this episode and anything that we said kind of resonated with them, or if they have more questions about powerlifting or training or anything like that, what's the best way for someone to get in contact with you, or where can people find you?
So you can hit me. So I like, I'm trying to get better at this on the social media game too. So I'm on Instagram. I'm Crucible_Strength. Facebook, I'm at Crucible Strength. And then you can also hit me and email me at Shaun@cruciblestrength.com.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. We'll put those things in the show notes, social media handles, and email. And if you guys are looking for a coach here, virtually, Denver area, whatever that might be, I can't recommend Shaun enough for any of your training needs, even if that's not powerlifting. Not all of Shaun's clients are competing in powerlifting.
Yeah, actually not. It's a very small. Yeah, that's actually not the main thing.
I see every day, or most days of the week, a lot of the folks that Shaun is working with. And one thing that I will tell you is, even though a lot of the coaches here inside of Lions Den have very dedicated, consistent clients, I have seen the same people walk through that door week after week after week for more than 2 years now to work with Shaun. And I have been able to see firsthand some of the progressions that they have made. And like Shaun said, there's always that heavy foundation root system before really reaping the rewards of a lot of that training. And it is paying off with a lot of the people here in the gym. So I can't recommend Shaun enough. So please reach out to him if you have any questions. And I hope that you guys had as much fun listening to this episode as we had recording it. Shaun, thank you.
Andrew, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you guys for listening to this episode of The Code, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.